There are moments in life that seem so small they almost disappear into the ordinary. A single choice. A single act of kindness. A meal shared. A helping hand. Most people walk past those moments without realizing they have the power to change everything. But sometimes, one quiet decision becomes the beginning of a miracle no one could have imagined. This is the unforgettable story of a woman who had almost nothing left to give, yet chose compassion over comfort. What happened after she gave away her only meal would leave an entire community speechless and prove that kindness always finds its way home. Before we begin, if you believe that kindness can change lives, that everyone deserves a second chance, and that even the smallest act of love matters, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Emily was 32 years old, but life had aged her far beyond the number of birthdays she had celebrated. Every morning before sunrise, she tied her light brown hair into a loose ponytail, put on her faded housekeeping uniform, slipped into worn white sneakers, and quietly walked through the streets toward the city hospital where she worked as a cleaner. The hospital was beautiful to visitors. Bright hallways, polished floors, smiling receptionists, and doctors rushing from one patient to another made it look like a place filled with hope. But Emily saw another side of it. She cleaned the tears from waiting room floors after families received heartbreaking news. She quietly emptied trash bins filled with tissues soaked in grief. She watched exhausted nurses skip meals to save lives and comfort frightened children who had forgotten what it felt like to smile. Every day she witnessed suffering, yet she never allowed it to harden her heart. Her own life was far from easy. Her husband had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness that consumed every dollar they had managed to save. The medical bills had left Emily drowning in debt. She moved into a tiny apartment with peeling walls and barely enough space for a bed, a small table, and a narrow kitchen. Most evenings she counted coins before deciding whether she could afford bread, rice, or canned soup. Luxury had disappeared from her vocabulary long ago. Survival had become her routine. One cold autumn afternoon, the hospital cafeteria smelled of warm soup and fresh bread. Emily had worked nearly 10 hours without sitting down. Her back ached. Her hands were sore from pushing heavy cleaning carts. She reached into her pocket and counted the last few dollars she had until payday. It was only enough to buy a simple meal. She ordered a bowl of vegetable soup, a small bread roll, and a bottle of water. It wasn't much, but after such a long day, it felt like a feast. Carrying the tray carefully, she searched for an empty table. Before she could sit down, something caught her attention near the cafeteria entrance. An elderly woman stood quietly against the wall, wrapped in an old gray coat that had clearly seen many winters. Her hands trembled. Her face was pale with exhaustion. She looked toward the food with the expression of someone who had not eaten in days. Pride kept her from asking anyone for help, but hunger was written across every wrinkle on her face. People walked past without noticing. Some were too busy. Others assumed someone else would help. Emily stood frozen. She looked down at her own meal. It was the only food she would have until late that evening. Her stomach growled loudly enough for her to hear it. She thought about how difficult the next few hours would be without eating. Then she looked back at the elderly woman. Without giving herself time to change her mind, Emily picked up her tray and slowly walked toward her. She smiled warmly, placed the food into the woman's shaking hands, and gently encouraged her to eat. The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears before she even touched the spoon. Gratitude overflowed from her face in a way words never could. Emily quietly stepped away, pretending nothing extraordinary had happened. For the rest of the afternoon, hunger followed her like a shadow. She drank water whenever her stomach cramped. She continued cleaning patient rooms, polishing floors, and emptying trash bins. Not once did she regret her decision. Deep inside, she believed someone who was truly starving needed that meal more than she did. That evening, after finishing her shift, Emily walked toward the bus stop beneath a gray sky threatening rain. As she waited, she noticed the same elderly woman sitting alone on a nearby bench. The meal tray was empty. Her face looked stronger than before, but sadness still surrounded her like a heavy blanket. Emily sat beside her without saying much. Sometimes people didn't need advice. They only needed someone willing to stay. Over the next several weeks, Emily occasionally saw the elderly woman around the neighborhood. Whenever she could spare a little food or a few minutes of company, she did. She never expected anything in return. She never even learned much about the woman's past. She simply believed loneliness could be just as painful as hunger. Meanwhile, Emily's own struggles grew worse. Her landlord warned her that rent was overdue. Utility bills stacked higher every week. Her old washing machine broke beyond repair. One rainy morning her shoes began leaking water during her walk to work. She silently wondered how much longer she could keep going. Yet every day she chose kindness again. She comforted frightened children with gentle smiles. She carried heavy bags for elderly visitors. She brought blankets to homeless patients waiting in the emergency department. She stayed late to help overwhelmed nurses clean rooms after difficult emergencies. No one noticed that the woman helping everyone else often skipped dinner herself. Then one ordinary Monday morning, something unexpected happened. A sleek black car stopped outside the hospital entrance. Several professionally dressed people stepped out carrying folders. Hospital administrators hurried to greet them. Employees whispered that important visitors had arrived to inspect the hospital. Emily barely paid attention. She simply continued mopping the hallway. As she rounded the corner, her heart nearly stopped. Standing among the visitors was the elderly woman. Only she looked completely different. Her gray coat had been replaced by an elegant navy suit. Her posture was confident. Her eyes were bright. She smiled the moment she recognized Emily. Confused employees watched as the distinguished woman walked directly toward the hospital cleaner and warmly embraced her. The hallway fell completely silent. The hospital director looked equally surprised. Then the elderly woman revealed a truth no one expected. Months earlier, she had disguised herself to quietly observe how ordinary people treated those they believed had nothing. She was Margaret Lawson, the retired founder of one of the country's largest charitable healthcare foundations. After losing her husband, she had devoted her fortune to helping hospitals identify people whose compassion could never be measured by job titles or salaries. She explained that countless people had ignored her. Many had looked away. Some had treated her as though she were invisible. Only Emily had given away the one thing she desperately needed herself. Not because cameras were watching. Not because anyone would reward her. But because compassion was simply part of who she was. Margaret had quietly investigated Emily's life afterward. The foundation had reached a unanimous decision. Emily would receive a life-changing grant to erase every medical debt left by her late husband. Her apartment would be fully paid for. She would receive financial support to continue her education if she wished. Most importantly, she would become the community outreach coordinator for the foundation, helping identify and support struggling families throughout the city. Emily stood speechless. Tears streamed down her face. She had expected nothing. She had simply shared a bowl of soup. The story spread quickly through the hospital. Nurses who had watched Emily quietly help others finally understood the depth of her character. Doctors praised her compassion. Patients thanked her for making difficult days a little brighter. For the first time in many years, Emily felt seen. But what changed her life forever was not the money. It was the opportunity. With Margaret's support, Emily began organizing free meal programs outside hospitals, ensuring that no family waiting beside a loved one had to choose between food and hope. She helped create emergency assistance funds for struggling caregivers. Volunteers joined from every corner of the city. Local restaurants donated meals. Grocery stores contributed supplies. Thousands of people were fed during the first year alone. The woman who once counted coins before buying soup was now helping entire communities eat with dignity. Years passed. Emily never forgot that single afternoon in the cafeteria. Whenever volunteers asked why she worked so tirelessly, she smiled and remembered the hunger she once felt, the empty wallet in her pocket, and the trembling hands of an elderly woman holding a simple bowl of soup. She often reminded everyone around her that generosity is not measured by how much we have. It is measured by what we are willing to share when giving feels difficult. The greatest miracles rarely begin with wealth. They begin with compassion. One meal became thousands. One act of kindness became a movement. One ordinary cleaner inspired countless strangers to believe that goodness still exists. Perhaps somewhere today, someone is standing quietly, hoping another person will notice their pain. Maybe they don't need a fortune. Maybe they only need a meal, a smile, a listening ear, or someone willing to remind them they are not invisible. The world often celebrates people with power, fame, and wealth. But history is quietly changed by people like Emily. People who choose kindness when no one is watching. People who give without expecting applause. People who remind us that love multiplies every time it is shared. If every person watching this story chose one small act of compassion today, imagine how many lives could change before the sun sets. A hungry neighbor could eat. A lonely senior could smile. A struggling parent could find hope. A frightened child could believe tomorrow will be better. Sometimes the greatest legacy we leave behind is not something we own. It is the kindness someone else remembers forever. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, subscribe to Kindness Speaks, and help us spread more stories that inspire compassion around the world. And before you go, we have one special request. Please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness always finds its way home." We'd love to know where you're watching from, because your message may encourage someone else who needs hope today. Thank you for being part of this journey, and never underestimate the power of one small act of kindness.